This is the final last episode of season 4 already. You're now listening to the most popular episode of previous seasons and my personal favorites. If you're new to the podcast, I interviewed 20 industry experts in a season on how to grow a B2B SaaS. At the end of the interview, I all asked them the exact same revenue related questions, which are: what kind of advice would you give a SaaS founder who's just starting out and growing to 10k monthly recurring revenue? And secondly, how to grow to 10 million ARR. In this video, you purely hear the answers from 20 industry experts on how to grow your SaaS to 10k monthly recurring revenue. If you already passed this stage, you might want to go ahead and listen to the next episode, which is geared towards 10 million ARR. Make sure to listen to the full episodes if you like their answers, but just let's dive right in. In episode 1, I interviewed Michael Kamleider on how to bootstrap 2 SaaS companies to a combined ARR of 10 million.
I would say be as close to your potential or existing customers as possible. You learn so much from them. At 10K, you didn't achieve product market fit yet. Being close to your customers, learn how they use your product, what their real pain is, and how you can improve your product to ease that pain. I think that's the single most important thing at this stage.
In episode 2, I interviewed Jamie Akhtar on how Cybersmart grew to 5 million ARR with 20 million in funding.
So for me, generic stuff, I'd say, is all that phase is all about failure or unplanned learning, however you want to look at it. But it's trying lots and lots of different stuff, and that can be with the product, it can be with the go-to-market, it can be with the team. It's like a really creative space, I'd say. It's where you figure out what works, what doesn't work, and I think you have to be super willing to adapt and pivot what you thought was true. So you're almost at that point, your brain is like 100% open and receptive, and as you grow past that, you obviously need to become a little more narrow in your focus. So trying lots of stuff, iterating a lot, because you'll never get it right first time, and I think often we'll fail if we try something 5-10 times. Like we called 200 partners. Once we realized the potential in channel, we called 200 partners to book 40 demos. So a lot of people would have made 5 or 10, 20 calls and been like, this isn't right for us. But by iterating, then we're able to get the script better, figure out what a good partner could look like, etc. And so the last bit I'd say in that stage is just perseverance, because it's nice to have that 10k goal in mind. I think it's almost better, coming back to what we were saying earlier about these numbers, it's almost better to say, what do I need to learn or prove to move to the next stage? And 10k is probably a nice, simple way of doing it. But actually, it's a bit more like, I want to have 10 customers that tell me this product is, they couldn't live without this product, right? Like the Sean Ellis product market fit test. Something like that, I think that's a better milestone almost than a revenue one.
In episode 3, I interviewed Esben Friis Jensen on how Userflow grew to 4.6 million ARR, which is the team of 3.
I think at that stage, it's all about finding customers, getting those initial customers on board and getting paying customers, especially now I'm speaking mostly for the B2B space, which I'm the space that I live in. But instead of chasing VC capital, chase customers, chase paying customers. That's where you will get the real feedback. So I think that's really, I see a lot of founders go wrong in that regard, that they chase VC capital, but they should really be chasing the first paying customers and get MRR and feedback from those. And the way to do that is really, in the beginning, it's all about grinding, getting connected to potential customers and getting them to try the product and so on. And then also opening up the floodgates by having something like a free trial, for instance, so people can also just find you and try it out, the people you are not able to connect with. I think a lot of people are afraid to open up and keep things behind a wait list for too long. So it's really about opening up the floodgates, but also grinding a bit to get those early customers and get them to pay.
In episode 4, I interviewed Michael Heiberg, getting to know the story behind Ocean.io and being AI first with 10 million in funding.
Revenue is less important. The quality of the customer is much more important. The quality of the first 10 customers, and make sure you can learn from it and they can validate or change your original concept, is far more important than reaching 10. Because it's all about building that thing that can scale and that has the stickiness with the customer. And you need the first 10, 15, 20 customers to validate that. that you're not a nice to have, but you're a need to have. Revenue will come as a function of that. Once you are a need to have because you hit it and you got it validated by your first set of customers, revenue is a function of that.
In episode 5, I interviewed Vlad Gospan on how Involve Me bootstrapped to a 7-figure in ARR and his lessons learned.
I think 0 to 10 depends. On the product side, I would say you'd have to be very picky and, in the best case scenario, productize a service that really well. And on the team side, I would say, having grown now several products from 0 to 10 and having grown several products from 10 to 20 plus million ARR, I would say that at different phases, you would need different people. So in the very beginning, 0 to 10, you would need a team, your co-founder team or the first employees that are generalists. So you would want people who are hungry and are generalists, and they can switch context and hustle on different fronts, if you will, while later on you would need a bit of a different skill set.
In episode 6, I interviewed Mari Martins on how Tally bootstrapped to 10k MRR, which is the team of 3.
Yeah, I think for us what worked was, just doing everything we could to get those first users and don't think about whatever scales or not, like do things that don't scale. It's such a cliche, but it's really what has helped us. And for us, that it was just, manually finding people that could be interested in our product and DMing them. And I think that's the best advice you can get, is just to find whatever works or wherever you can find your target audience and do that over and over again until you hit some scale. I think something else I've learned along the way is don't be afraid to ask. There's so many people that have done this before. I think mainly like Twitter and indie hackers is right where I get most of my information, because of people building in public and usually having the same struggles. And I think the most interesting part there is that it doesn't really make sense to follow someone that is like years ahead. Someone who's just a few steps ahead usually can share the most relevant info. They're also just one email or DM away, right? So if you're lucky, you might be able to ask a couple of questions and save yourself a lot of time. So that would be my advice. I think for us as well, being a bit stubborn and sticking to our principles, like we've always kept Tally simple and free. It's like the framework in which we operate. And a lot of people have told us, like, oh, you're leaving money on the table, you should raise your prices, all of that. But like sticking to what works and repeating that.
In episode 7, I interviewed Michael Heap on how my Ask AI bootstrapped with a team of 2 to 300k ARR.
I'd probably say to look for your distribution channels first. I think that's the hardest part. Like, building products now is super easy. There's so many resources, there's so many tools that you can build an MVP of something really quickly. The really tough thing is finding what the distribution channel is going to be. And I think, like, now, if I was starting something else that I wanted to really grow, I would probably look for a distribution partner who is really already influential in that field. It's some advice I heard from another podcast, and I think it's so relevant now, because products grow so quickly that if you don't immediately have the distribution, then you just get flooded with copycats and it just becomes hyper competitive. Whereas, if you've got that partner, they're basically worth their weight in gold or equity, because they already have that reach, and it's going to massively increase your chances of actually making something work.
In episode 8, I interviewed Joe Lewin, getting the learnings of a second-time SaaS founder.
First and foremost, make sure your business, market, model, customer, idea is truly validated, and ensure that it's not just your friends that are saying, yes, go for it, but actually real potential customers figuring out, would they pay for this? Run a deep dive audit on all of the various risks at play. Murphy's Law, whatever will go wrong, or can go wrong, will go wrong, and just preparing for that. And prepare mentally and physically, because it's going to be a difficult journey. But first 10k MRR is probably the hardest. 10K to 100 it gets a little bit easier, and then 100 plus. By then you've got a lot of processes in place. But yeah, I encourage any aspiring entrepreneur, just put in the work.
In episode 9, I interviewed Bridget Harris on how to bootstrap a B2B SaaS to 5 million ARR and beyond.
I just think there's only one thing, which is don't run out of money. I just think it's cash management, honestly. Good, solid financial tooling, a solid financial set of banking and reports, and you know what your cash flow is, you know how much everything is, and try to avoid spending money on anything that you don't have an immediate reaction back to what you can do with that. So if you're spending that money on developers to build the tool, great, but as long as what they're doing is building something that you know you can immediately sell back to customers. So at this stage, there's really no other priority. Don't run out of money. Cash is king.
Yeah, and one other thing you mentioned a lot, do you already recommend obsessing over customers in this stage?
Oh yeah, yes, I'm taking that as a given. So the thing is that people might think, oh, I've got to, I don't know, spend money on going around and advocating or marketing or lots of merchandise, or like at the time when we started, we had, do you remember the Google Chromebooks? They were 200 quid. You know, we didn't sit there and go, yeah, everybody's getting MacBook Pros. Like you can get caught up in startup world where it's all about yoga in the morning and free fruit in the afternoon. And none of that is related to customer value. So it's about what can I spend money on, which is going to give additional value or a feature to a customer, and you keep that feedback loop from customer to cash to value really tight. You don't run out of money because you only spend money on things that matter to customers.
In episode 10, I interviewed Preston Keller on how to grow your SaaS while being sued.
I'm known for being El Cheapo, being the cheap guy, and it's served me well as a founder. So my advice here is to stay lean. Be resourceful, be frugal, be good stewards of the investment that someone's trusted you with, or your own investment.
Would you recommend them doing the cold calling, for example, how you guys got your first clients? Like anything, acquisition advice for the first 10K?
It's an old school method, but it's tried and true. The way we modeled it was like, hey, we're paying these part-time college kids $12 an hour, and then they get a commission based on the demo that they set. It was very cost effective, and we've kept the same model today. It is a very good base, but then they have a higher reward if they keep grinding and building up their pipeline.
Are you struggling to find people and companies which have access to your ideal customer profile? At Redditis, we just launched a second side of the marketplace, which allows you to search, filter, and contact B2B SaaS affiliates which have access to the audience you're looking for. We do this by leveraging first-party data sources. Want to learn more? Go to getredditis.com. In episode 11, I interviewed Leah Martin on bootstrapping your fully remote B2B SaaS beyond 20 million ARR.
If you can't generate 10,000 MRR getting on the phone and talking to people and closing deals that way, it's probably not going to work out. So you need to grind to that first 10K. You need to know that there's something possible there. And so I would say that's the first stage. We generated, and I remember specifically on staff.com, we generated the first $500,000 just off of my phone Rolodex. Hey, I always heard that you needed a bookkeeper, but we have, do you want to go and check them out? That kind of a thing. 10,000 MR. And then I would probably say outside of that too is how you got to that first 10,000 MRR is probably not the product that's going to get you to 100,000 MRR. So don't be married to it completely. We originally in Time Doctor, a core component of the application was a project management system. And it was like time tracking and project management combined. And we tried to pitch this to so many people that were active customers of ours. Why aren't you using the project management component? And they said, oh, well, we're using Basecamp, or we're using Asana, or we're using Notion, or we're using Monday.com. And we're like, yeah, but this is free. This is included with what you're, with Time Doctor. And they just said like, screw off. We don't like it. We're not willing to try that. And we realized, and I got a really good piece of advice from somebody, which was one day on the dashboard, we had the project on Time Doctor. And we ran an experiment where we just removed it from the dashboard. And the outcome was, how many angry letters do you get from the link disappearing. Like it still exists inside of the app. Let's just remove that link from the dashboard and see how many angry letters, emails that we got. We got 3, and we probably had 1,000 customers at that point. And we were like, let's not do that anymore. Like that was probably a third of our engineering budget was building this project management system. And we just realized that it was really stupid for us to be able to do it because no one was using it. I would also say too, first 10,000 MRR, your customers are not always right. Your customers are an experiment. Treat them like an experiment. Do not treat them like the precious, unique snowflakes that they are. Your job is to identify how can you scale those customers. So you could quite possibly treat them badly, rip a feature out of their hands one day randomly to be able to measure the reaction of that activity. Because if you're at 100 customers, 200 customers, when you're at 10,000, no one will remember. But when you're at 10,000, everyone will remember. So you need to be able to make sure that you've figured all that out before you're at that stage.
In episode 12, I interviewed Gary Emerald, getting the learnings and advice from a second-time SaaS founder.
Focus on grind. I think sometimes people over-index on repeatability, scalability, process in early days. Early days is about grind. Founders should be knees deep in the sales process. They should be talking to as many prospects, if not all prospects, in those early days. They should be looking at revenue almost as secondary to learning. Have a goal, have an objective on the revenue side, but understand that you don't really know anything yet, right? A bunch of hypotheses. Once you've used that period to get to that point, then you need to obsess on scalability. You need to obsess on repeatability. How do you take everything you learned, getting to that first 10K, find a way to impart it on everybody that is involved in the sales process and make it something that can scale without you?
In episode 13, I interviewed Ivana Todorovic on how ArtedUp achieved 3,000 paying clients with their go-to-market strategy.
I would say try to niche down as much as possible. Try to get one type of the ideal customer that you have in mind. Feel amazing when they are using your product and try to make your product to be much better than the alternatives because you probably don't have a name brand, etc. So you really, really want to have relationships at the beginning, solve one real pain and charge enough so people feel great when they are paying you and they are looking to support you in the future.
In episode 14, I interviewed Karsten Madsen on how Morningscore transforms SEO with gamification.
I would say don't take too much advice. Be careful, right? And grind. Know that this is, if you're too fancy to get dirty, then don't do this, because in the beginning you need to just get out there and tell everyone that what you're doing and really grind it. In most cases, that's the case. If you're doing some kind of deep tech, maybe that doesn't apply to you. But for those of us who are out here to catch customers, we need to just grind. One maybe tip, if it feels uncomfortable, then it's good. If there's pain involved, then it's good. If it doesn't feel uncomfortable or painful, then you're doing something wrong. It has to feel a little bit like that. So an example could be some of the LinkedIn posts that I put up that I felt like shit, everyone's going to laugh at this, and I felt uncomfortable putting it up there. It was also my most successful ones that drove the most customers, because for whatever reason that really resonated with people. Another example is I hate sales, but you just got to suck it up and do that as part of, especially in the beginning as a founder. So if that feels uncomfortable to you, good. That means you should be doing more of it. And one thing I thought a lot about lately is that all of us entrepreneurs can easily read a book. We've all read many of the same books. So knowledge is actually, even if it takes a long time to read a book, it's not painful. Everyone can do it. But what is the one thing that most people have a hard time doing? It's being brave and having and enduring pain. So actually now I have this new mindset that I'm like, if something is painful, then I'm happy, because it's like, it means that this is actually the real growth hack, right? If it's painful, it's a growth hack for me, because I know that not many other people will be doing this.
In episode 15, I interviewed Thomas de Klerk on how most B2B SaaS surpass 5 million ARR with their scaling success.
What I would do, and I believe that I have done, I'm just speaking for myself, what I haven't done enough in the beginning is with your initial customers, really having crystal clear and eventually asking them one time too much on every step of why they eventually chose you and how that potentially changed even after signing a contract with you. I don't think, at least we haven't done that enough, and I'm not sure if you're at 10K MRR or lower, you're grasping and putting enough time in that, because that can be so crucial for yourself going to a next ARR or MRR milestone. Because from your existing customers, it's classic, but again, I believe we haven't done that enough, is really understanding from your existing customers how they came along and how that opinion still is today, because that's exactly what should go into your marketing and your sales pitch for finding new customers. It's no rocket science, but I believe that we haven't done that enough. We're doing better now, but it's something I would really recommend 10K MRR customers, especially if you're non-funded, but even if you're funded, you should still do that.
In episode 16, I interviewed Blake Hutchinson on buying and selling a SaaS, like everything you need to know.
So I'm in 10K monthly. I would probably first think about price point, and I would think about the least path of resistance. So what is the most your clients are willing to pay you, and how many clients do you therefore need before you can tick off that milestone? And so often people think about how they can own a market, and therefore freemium products, cheap products, these types of things. If you're trying to get to 10K, and let's say for argument's sake, you're not wealthy, then the pathway to keeping a roof over your head is not about winning the world, and it's not about freemium. It's about the highest price point your customers are willing to pay for you to tick off that milestone. And that's different as you scale. You, over time, can build a freemium product and use that as a lead magnet. You, over time, can charge very little and go for scale. But if the question is actually what is the fastest pathway to 10K, the fastest pathway to 10K is the highest price point that each customer is willing to pay.
In episode 17, I interviewed Farzad Rashidi on how to build a startup within a corporate, where he built Respona within Visma.
I would say that one of the things that helped us really well at the very beginning was me being the person in charge of sales and onboarding. So having that one-on-one approach of seeing the prospects, seeing which one of them saw the value, signed up, and then what would happen after the sale. So what would happen after the close? How would they use the system? And then what sort of problems they would solve. So all of that info that I gathered just talking to customers, and me being the main person doing the sales and the customer success role, helped us, one, shape our marketing strategy, figuring out, because it's one of the first questions you ask them, how did you hear about us? And it's very hard to do that in a forum. Like, you want to see that person one-on-one, they tell you about it. So you could go and beef up those channels that they found you on. And two is building the roadmap based on their experience. Like, I have our customers share their screen while we're going through the onboarding. So when I ask them to do something and they're confused, they click around, and it's a very clear pattern of where we need to improve in terms of our UI. So we are completely reconstructed our UI from scratch in our 2.0 version based on because of all the conversations that we've had with our customers. So it makes it a lot simpler to use. So that would probably more than you bargain for. But yeah, that would be the one thing, is the founder being involved in sales and customer success.
In episode 18, I interviewed David Baum, getting the learnings from a SaaS founder with more than 25 years of entrepreneur experience.
First, what is your price point? How much will you give per customer? So if you're looking for 10K and you're selling at $249 a month, that's 40 customers. That's really not that many customers. It's certainly as many customers as you can manage to find in your extended network of the people you speak to sort of during a month or two. So the first thing is to realize that you don't need that many, and they are all within an arm's reach. So certainly do stuff that doesn't scale. Meet up at the physical events. That's actually worth it, because if you can get 3 customers by attending a conference, even though you had hundreds of conversations, that is almost 10% of that 10K a month. You only need 1 more and you have 4. So it's building step by step and understanding that if you're under 10K, your primary goal is you're still working on product market fit. When you have onboarded a customer, and you'll have to handle, the primary goal then is to focus on retention and keeping them happy and adapting to what they need, actually speaking with them as often as you possibly can, getting their feedback and demonstrating that you take that feedback into account and you roll out improvements or changes and alterations, and you just make them happy. And the base case here is if you can get one customer and make them really happy, then there's likely going to be others that you can do the same. And the goal really should be first to build 1, 2, or 3 good, happy customer relationships, and then create success stories out of that. And that is really what propels you forward. I'd say one of the things we think a lot about is how we can create a sort of a growth flywheel, and how building a platform like we do, where we're serving teams, but the team has that characteristic that many or most don't work in the same organization. How can you get that to spread in a productive way? How can we work deeply with the various different roles? Every advisor to startups, they say you should have only one ICP and you should address just one slim segment of the market. Our problem is that we have 3 ICPs, which are the team. And without those 3, then you really can't get much done. I suppose I could build a platform only for freelancers or for solopreneurs or something. But I think the price point there means that it's not the place you want to start. You could serve tens of millions of Indian solopreneurs or freelance content copywriters, but I don't think that's the attractive end of the market to start. So working with more mature teams that you can actually solve their problem in that distributed context is one of the things we're thinking about. And based on all that, of course, founder-led marketing and sales is where your focus should be.
In episode 19, I interviewed Rory Sadler on go-to-market learnings from B2B SaaS Trumpet.
I'd say embrace the scrappiness. I think don't get too distracted with big logos really early on. If you know you're building a product for enterprise from day one, that's different. If you're still figuring that out, enterprise, it's all the kind of shiny big budget, but it's going to be more distracting. It's going to take longer than you ever think, because you don't have MFA, you don't have permissions, you don't have SOC 2, you don't have custom, whatever it might be, or a certain integration. There are so many requirements that founders miss when they have a conversation with someone. I'm like, oh, I'm speaking to so-and-so at MongoDB or someone at Salesforce. And it's, do you really understand what it's going to take for that organization to back a startup where there's maybe 6, 10 of you and you've been going like just over a year? It's probably not going to happen. And we were naive. In the early days, we had a few people sign up from big logos. We got distracted and we thought, oh yeah, we can get them on. But actually, it's being aware of where you really are and what customers can you actually serve and focusing on them. And then there's this concept of the bird in hand principle, where you really lean into your network, whether it's someone that who's great at photography, or it's someone who's got a podcast studio at their co-working space. Like, lean into all these people, be scrappy with the resources you have around you. And like through that, 1, you're then increasing your network, but 2, you're not putting all the pressure on doing everything yourself internally. I think you feel like you need to do that. You have to do everything yourself. But there's no like golden ticket, like here's the one thing to do. I just say embrace the scrappiness. Actually, I'd go back to saying what I said earlier. Getting customers using your product is more valuable than the actual exact dollar amount.
In episode 20, I interviewed Dan Asse on building a client-obsessed SaaS, insights from a seasoned SaaS founder.
I think we're at the first stages. Finding customers that you can co-create or at least validate with is very critical. So I think in a lot of the B2B startups, like even with UCourse that in the end failed, we tried to work with customers, because I think at the early stage, as a founder, you're also trying to manage your risk. Of course, you can put in a lot of your own money in the beginning, but you want to reduce the risk for yourself. So I think co-creating with customers would be definitely an advice. And it's possible in the B2B space. Of course, in small and medium enterprises, it's a bit more tricky. But in enterprise, all of these big companies have a digital innovation department that you can connect with and see if there's a way of collaborating on a business problem that they face that you can solve. So I think in that stage, that would be my advice.
That was it. These summary episodes are my personal favorites as they're value packed. I do have a 5-second request. Could you grab the device you're currently listening on and just leave us a review for the podcast and give us a follow if you haven't done so already? would be much appreciated. This podcast is made available by Reditus. I'm the founder of Reditus, and we help you to set up, manage, and recruit B2B SaaS affiliates, which can help you to grow your B2B SaaS. Go check out getreditus.com for more information, but that's enough promotion for now. Have a great day and see you in season 5.